So hey guys, and welcome back to the Starfather path that we've been going through in the Equestria at War mod for Hearts of Iron 4. First matter of business today will be at last finishing the civil war we've been in for actually ever at this point, and defeat the Cultivan Republic that we were formerly playing as back in episode 1, be it briefly in the scheme of things. And while we do that, we continue with the journey, a new journey though, on a new continent. It's about time that we start brewing some stuff. We have some hints for what exactly to put together, so we'll do that. Also, it's very important that we begin this purification mandate. We get a bonus of justifying war goals against avian countries. The advent of a direful destiny. We have arrived. The guide opened her eyes. It was time to begin the journey into the heart of Zalmar's creations, the continent of Griffonia. She glanced at the equine of silver who had awoken her. Zethiro was relatively short and soft-spoken, but he had proven himself more than capable on multiple occasions during the rise of the Ascendancy. In all those civil wars, he must have fought bravely, and he was lucky enough to choose the right side every time. Without another word, the two zebras ascended to the boat's deck and took in the scenery of Seguro, a flourishing city on the coast of the broad Magocracy. Oh no, not that place. This place is one of the few places that are about as creepy as we are. For those of you who might not remember, it involves like a goddess and nuclear bombs. Suffer not the unclean. With fury and determination, the guide shoved her way to the two creatures that had defiled her eyes. The two seemed to notice her as she got closer, though that did not slow her advance. The griffin initially wore an expression of worry, then it turned into concern as he addressed the stranger storming towards him. "Are you all right? Can we help?" His words were cut off by a swift movement that saw a dagger now protruding from his throat. He gurgled and weakly reached for the blade, then collapsed. The zebra beside him gasped, not able to speak from the shocking event she just witnessed. The guide pressed the blade down to ensure the griffin's death. "Such filth has no place in this world. O ye who have poisoned the equine, I grant thee the fate you deserve." Last time she was staring into the sunset with a buffalo and kind of realizing that this isn't right, and now she's just murdering griffins because she hates birds again. We'll continue. Speaking of birds, the purification mandate of Eris. I'm sure only great things are going to happen here. Note being that there may be a lot of birds in this mountain. Wings of sacrifice. The journey took the two zebras north through the mountains of Barad. Though the harsh and sudden climate shifts were loathsome at best and hazardous at worst, their tenacity and willpower saw them through. After all, Zethiro had assured the guide that her first destination was worth any sacrifice to see at least once. And see it they did. Inside the land of Ponadine, at the bottom of a narrow valley, was a breathtaking sight, the city of Delmore, which was a radical departure from anything the guide had seen up to this point. Gone was all semblance of modern civilization, instead replaced largely by vast, extravagant monasteries and temples that stretched into the valley as far as the eye could see. So she kills some winged creature thing. It's like a tiny floating pony. The teacher's goal is worth any life, no matter how large or small. This reminds me of Horton Hears a Who, but the opposite. Anyways, I think we will do this focus to declare war on Lombet. Or we should probably go after these guys first. We justified on them forever ago, and then had to stop because Eris declared war on us. That was like 5 years ago at this point. We also have a friend, Westardly Leeward. Fun fact too, he sent us volunteers for that war we just fought. He is a very good friend, and he sends us volunteers again. Very helpful considering we're pretty evenly matched here, honestly. We also really need to design some new ships because we're going to have to cross the ocean soon, and I don't know if the most difficult naval battles are behind us or if they're still to come. So we'll just be ready either way with some pretty decent ships. We also have the special ability, since we're not allowed to trade with anybody in this path, to transmute resources. Doesn't look like we can transmute into chromium though, Or it looks like more options. Oh yeah, chromium. Good. Yeah, we need chromium to make these new ships, so it is very important that we have that. Also, it looks like for our last focus, we need a lot of crystals in Colthage. Hopefully we have better ways of getting it than just transmuting materials, but maybe that's all we'll be able to do. Anyways, I'm going to try to make some potions now, based on some hints we got in events from last time. Ah, yes, I made one thing, the Seedling's Kiss. Boosts one's productivity and ability to be productive. That's the same. I do not feel the need to elaborate on this, as I am above such things. Minus 8% consumer goods and plus 6.9% monthly population. That's pretty powerful. Anyways, that's enough. We've done one alchemical super project. We'll have to wait 82 days for the next one, so we will continue on with this war that I'm not winning. Also, Zecora's resistance was just annexed. Interesting. We met her in the forest some time back. She gave us one of our ingredients. I can't look at it right now because we're on cooldown, but that's interesting. Also, now we can do these agricultural projects. I don't know what they're going to do. Well, I guess we're seeing right now, but a beautiful spectacle will contribute a little to restoring the godhead. Instead of a pleasant sight, we should instead see them as a resource to be utilized for the Ascendancy's benefit. That's fun. Nothing matters, of course, only the success of the Ascendants. And a brief respite. This should be the rendezvous spot, the guide said as she set her bags onto the ground. With any luck, this westerly leeward should be meeting up with us soon. I had no idea that the Star Father had so many friends, stated Zethiro in wonder. He sat down next to a tree, making himself comfortable. Perhaps after this is done, I could introduce you to him as thanks for your help so far. That would be an honor. The two settled down next to a river north of the city of Ivanhorn. The territories of Wittenland were a treat to wander through, with many a talented pony showing the travelers the wonders of Wintenlandic traditions. The best part was the local food, which was simply heavenly. So they wait to meet, I guess, the most powerful guy in the entire area. I don't know, it's kind of weird that they're having a secret meeting with him. Fiery cycle. To the zebras' mild disappointment, Westerly Leeward was not with the heavily armed squad. Said squad had explained that Westerly was preoccupied with the happenings back in... Yeah, this is what I was saying. He leads... never mind. So we shot a phoenix out of the sky and gathered one of its feathers for our alchemical super projects, which I will continue momentarily. The innkeeper. With the phoenix feather secured, the guide and Zethiro checked into the Mazis Nama, so small inn on the outskirts of Ivanhorn. They were greeted by a lone stallion who, despite the ghastly scars across his body, maintained a cheerful demeanor towards his visitors. After being given the keys to their rooms, the two began to head upstairs. However, Zethiro paused to take another look around the place. The longer he looked, the more perplexed he became. This architecture, it's not Wittenlandic. The innkeeper coughed and chuckled, placing his hoof on an old desk. You've got a sharp eye. I modeled this in after my old house in Visaginus. The guide stopped walking up the stairs, suddenly interested in listening to their conversation. Zethiro's eyes lit up. The Vartai region. They always had such an interesting culture there. His light-hearted expression vanished as he remembered one crucial detail, but the Griffins ruined it, like they do to everything. Yes, though, the innkeeper's breathing became slightly ragged. There are a few good ones. Impossible. The guide cut in. The avian knows only to see and desires only to serve their own. The innkeeper's cough subsided, though he leaned onto the desk for support. He took a long look at the guide, seeming to consider how hostile her reaction had been to his comment. Both seemed to have come a long way. Would you be interested in hearing a tale about what the Griffins did to this old tired stallion? Zethiro looked to the guide, who gave a terse nod. The innkeeper smiled. Then let me tell you a story. A story that I feel you need to hear. So he tells the story of a country that hated ponies to contrast against their country that is currently going on this crusade against avians. Yeah, she'll learn eventually to stop murdering birds, I hope. He also showed her this picture of a pony hugging a bird. It has had a substantial impact on her. Debate. Westerly's Spec Ops team was waiting for them when they left the inn. The two zebras explained where they needed to go next, and plans were drawn up for how to obtain the next ingredient, the silk of the Agisic Spider Queen. The journey to the Agisic forest was a quiet one. Zethiro could tell that the guide was bothered by what the innkeeper had said to her, but she refused to talk about it. He wondered about his own past and considered the possibility possibility that, no, he didn't want to think about it. The group stopped at a small clearing where a grand web was spun in front of them. It was taller than any building the guide had ever seen, and in the center of it laid a behemoth of a spider surrounded by countless eggs. It sat perfectly still, watching their every move. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out as one of the Spec Op members fired at a nearby spider that got too close for their liking. What followed was utter horror as numberless spiders began to descend upon the team. The guide pulled Zethiro away and began to run towards the Spider Queen's web. The Spec Ops team unloaded their weapons into a horde of spiders, but with every one they failed, dozens more appeared from the darkness. By the time the guide reached the bottom of the web, the gunfire had stopped. With a terrified Zethiro in tow, she quickly cut off a piece of silky web and turned to leave, making sure to move slowly and calmly through the masses of spiders. So we got spider silk and rock solid teamwork. The guide didn't know what exactly she was looking for, but the guidance drew her to this place, and the guidance had never failed her. I just don't understand how it is that you are so certain that we need something not on the list. And why would it be here? There's nothing but shoreline and rocks and crabs. I hate crabs. She husked Zethiro, quiet. We need to be patient. I just have a feeling. It's hard to explain. Zethiro briefly opened his mouth to protest, but said nothing. They continued to wait for some time. Eventually, the angle of the sun began to shine in Zethiro's eyes, which caused him to shift around for a less blinding position. The guide hissed at him again and told him to be still no matter what. Not a few moments later, they began to hear the flapping of wings from behind them. The guide and Zethiro ever so silently turned their heads to see part of an absolutely gargantuan bird land on top of the outcropping that they had only partially ascended. Still, the two sat quietly, making no noise and no sudden movements. As time passed, the sun set. The bird seemed to fall asleep. The guide procured a small vial from her pouch and lightly kicked Zethiro. We need one of its feathers. I'll pluck one. You hold this chemical up to its beak. It should put the creature to sleep if it wakes up. Having been saved by the guide on multiple occasions now, Zethiro knew better than to question her. The two zebras quietly climbed up the rest of the outcropping to get to the giant bird. Upon reaching the top, they saw the creature for what it was, a rock. The guide made her way to the rock's wing while Zethiro crawled up to its beak. The fact that the beak was almost as large as him didn't do his nerves any favors. The two looked at one another and nodded. Zethiro held the vial up and silently prayed while the guide plucked a feather from its wing. The rock's eyes shot open briefly, freezing Zethiro in fear, but then they slowly closed again. The two slowly backed away, making off with another ingredient for the Starfather's super project. Now, speaking of super project, it's time to start mixing random ingredients. Well, not completely random, because I have some hints, but mostly. Okay, for this one we mixed an abstract ingredient with something tough and something wet, and got Heartbreaker. Interesting, it gives us division defense at the cost of monthly population. Weird. Anyways, I guess we'll wait a while, 82 more days, and then we can do another alchemical super project. Okay, and it appears that we can transmute things into crystals, and then transmute crystals into chromium. So that's how we're going to amass chromium. And now we attack. Lombet. It says that they only have 2 to 8 divisions. Oh, they're a puppet of a country that has 48 to 140 divisions? I didn't even notice that. Oh no, they have a navy too? This isn't very good. The captivating captain, welcome aboard, cheered the stubby changeling as she helped her passengers step onto her rather cramped ship. The guide and Zethiro sat their bags down and silently agreed with one another never to cheap out on chartering a boat again. The changeling either didn't notice their dissatisfaction or pretended not to, for she happily hummed a tune while preparing her trusted dinghy for the voyage ahead. Without thinking, Zethiro blurted out, "You seem awfully friendly compared to most changelings." "Almost too friendly," the guide added with a hint of distaste. "Recently I had a poor experience with your kind." Yeah, that didn't go so well when she killed 10 of them when they attacked her. The changeling didn't seem too bothered at all. "Oh, I get that a lot. Don't worry, I'm not gonna suck you dry." Yeah, that's a good thing to say. Yes. Okay, I'm not gonna do the thing with Eris. I'm going to just encircle these 10 divisions here. This is better than Eris. We're not just going to let them attack into us. We're just going to destroy their divisions. So we have to decide here between the Legionary Assembly and the Grand Masters of Virtue. So this just gives us planning speed. This gives us speed. I'm getting speed. No, not that kind, just the hidden spring. It didn't take the guide long to figure out that the holy water she needed wasn't in Blackwater or anywhere around it. The locals were both extremely helpful and vague vague when questioned about where she could find some. After connecting several explanations together, she and Zethiro deduced that the mystical liquid they seeked laid in the water forest to the west. The journey was uneventful, almost ominously so. It seemed like every hour the landscape transformed more and more from the usual taiga into something truly alien. They began to have difficulty traversing the almost dreamlike maze of ancient trees, streams, and rivers that broke apart into tiny narrow waterways. Giant mushrooms appeared from every new corner that weaved into the seemingly endless forest canopy. Chirps and other noises from typical woodland critters were replaced by unfamiliar crackles and hisses. With some difficulty, they managed to locate the source of the stream, a tranquil spring from which water flowed out with nothing flowing in to replenish it. "This is it," said the guide as she pulled out a flask from her pouch. She reached down and scooped some of the crystal clear but otherwise mundane-looking water into the flask and sealed it shut. Zethiro sighed in relief. That was surprisingly easy. Hopefully, the next few would also be free of problem. "You are not welcome here." The guide and Zethiro whipped themselves around towards the sudden somber voice. The guide instinctively readied her knife, as she knew that anyone who could actually sneak up on her usually didn't have good intentions. The hooded mare behind them remained composed despite the intruder's hostile stance. She turned her head, glancing towards the path that the zebras had entered from. "You have defiled God's holy place. Your intentions are impure, though we cannot stop you without enough bloodshed that our victory would be pyrrhic. Leave before you pollute our home any further." The guide and Zethiro briefly looked at each other. Zethiro shrugged, and the guide turned to the mare and bowed in an attempt to apologize. "We apologize for the intrusion. We will depart at once." We got some water from the holy springs of the water towns. Okay, and we got the encirclement. This war has already turned massively in our favor. Letting them through these passes might be a good idea because they're just getting themselves encircled for free by entering areas they have no supply in very narrow columns. We could maybe encircle them here too. And we've got the essence of loyalty. And now another successful alchemical super project loses its organization but gives us 5 recovery rate. Weird. I don't know if that's the thing that we want right now, but I guess we'll take it. It's not like we can get rid of these. We're also kind of in the process of encircling a giant chunk of their army, so we might not need the organization for much longer if this is successful. They get encircled. A terror for them, and also we have the terror of Whitetail. I tried to get here like 20 times, but I kept failing. At least it worked now. The treacherous peaks of Whitetail did not earn their name for nothing. Every day was met with challenging terrain, remnants of bandits, and dangerous creatures that threatened their expedition. Fortunately, none of these proved too difficult to overcome. Just as they had finished killing another avian that tried to rob them, Zethiro began to come down with an illness. The guide helped him to a nearby cave where they took shelter for the remainder of the day while she administered potions to him. Despite her expert knowledge of medicine, he did not seem to recover. She scowled, surmising that he must have caught something not covered by her repertoire of elixirs. Suddenly, she heard a menacing growl pierce the muted howl of the mountain's wind. She turned to the cavern's entrance to see a fearsome winged boar slowly advancing towards her. She glanced back to Zethiro, whose fever had made him unresponsive. What luck she had, finding exactly what she needed at the worst time possible. The guide readied her knife and surprised the boar by charging towards it. The boar charged back, but it did not expect her to jump over it. While angling the knife to cut its head and back open, she passed through the air. She spent the rest of the day trying to heal him to no avail. His illness seemed to only get worse, though he did have brief moments of consciousness here and there. During one such moment, he asked her to get a medical equine of gold, seeming to forget exactly where he was, but soon he passed out just as quickly. The guide weighed her options. She could go back to the ponies of that odd village. No, they probably wouldn't help her, considering how they had reacted to the two of them. She could continue her journey in hopes that the northern ponies had a remedy, or she could go with the unthinkable option. The avians and Whitetail were both close by and might have experience with this illness themselves. She fed him more potions, picked him up, then began to head northwest to the ponies. Well, if he dies because she won't go to the avians for help, then that's kind of stupid, but, you know, not surprising. And I moved my navy away for 1 second, and this unfortunately happened. I didn't even try to move my navy away. I was just messing up while trying to reassign it. At least they're getting a lot of divisions encircled. But if they reinforce this landing, I'm doomed. And it looks like that's what they're doing, because they still outnumber us 3-1. And at death's door, as their journey continued into the Arctic North, Zethiro's situation grew more and more dire. The plethora of potions that the guide had been giving him only seemed to keep him moderately stable. The tips of his hoofs began to turn purple, though whether that was from the disease or from frostbite, she wasn't sure. She didn't have time to check, especially since the calm tundra had given way to a fearsome blizzard. She even had to down the last of her healing potions just to warm herself enough to keep going. She paused to check her compass, only to find that it wasn't there. She turned around, hoping to find it in the snow nearby, but the blizzard was too fierce. She could barely see the ends of her hoofs as it was. As loath as she was to use the guidance this way, she needed help here. The guide closed her eyes and focused. She felt drawn to an odd direction, and so she followed the will of the ever-present guidance. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself at the mouth of a modest cave. Not particularly deep, but it offered some shelter from the elements. She entered it and carefully set Zethiro down, then threw her cloak over him to keep him warm. Zethiro began to cough again. The guide unloaded her bags and took stock of her medical supplies, only to be faced with the grim reality of the situation. She did not have any means to save him, not without help, not without. A realization clicked in her mind. The final ingredient she had yet to find, the hammer of the Thunder Bear, was a legendary artifact said to instill strength and the will to survive into wherever held it. If she could find it, then it just might be able to save him long enough for her to get more medical supplies. She quickly turned to leave the cavern, but then a weak voice halted her hoofs. "Mom?" The guide turned around. Zethiro was immobile, his eyes closed, his breathing was ragged. It would seem that he had become delirious as well. "It's so dark. Please don't go." She cursed at it. She cursed at Zalmar. She cursed at his creation. She cursed this forsaken continent and every hardship that they had endured for the teacher. She cursed this maddening illness that she could not cure. She cursed herself for not bringing a wider variety of potions. The guide stared at her dying friend. The chances of the final ingredient being able to save him were slim, but it might just be worth pursuing, though she feared that she might not return in time to save him. If she was to leave, then she needed to decide now. So if we stay with him, there's like a 100% chance that he dies. If we try to find the ingredient, then he can maybe survive. So I think we try to find the ingredient, but this is kind of terrible decision. The hammer of the Thunder Bear. The guide sped out of the cave as fast as she could, through the blistering chill and scalding snow, as she ran with such determination that nothing short of divine intervention would stop her. She wouldn't lose another friend, not again. For how long she ran, she didn't know. The guidance prodded her to turn left and head up a hill. It wasn't that far now. She could feel it. At the crest of the hill, she squinted her eyes and looked all around her. Through the blizzard, she spotted something, a series of dirtied tombstones partially hidden in the snow. She made her way to them, only to find that she could not read the odd language hacked onto them. Many of the gravestones had suffered from severe wear and tear, but the guide could tell that love and care had been put into almost all of them, for no two shared a design. Unfortunately, she did not know which one held the hammer. The guide's aid had ended here. She was on her own. The guide considered picking graves at random to dig up, but dismissed the idea, as she would likely freeze to death before she found the hammer. None of the gravestones seemed to suggest that any particular grave held the mythical item she sought. She grit her teeth. The cold was starting to numb her extremities, just as she had resigned herself to starting with the fanciest looking grave. She noticed something. All the gravestones had a pony etched on them, except for one. The last was a small, otherwise unremarkable stone that had a bear-shaped form on it. She immediately began to dig. If this Thunder Bear was buried here, then the hammer must be with them. By the time she removed enough snow to access the grave, her hoofs had begun to feel like they were burning, not a good sign. She grimaced with significant effort. She managed to heft open the coffin. Inside was a frozen pony skeleton with what looked like the pelt of a polar bear on it. Bear claws were strewn around a necklace around its neck, and in its hoofs was a dual, withered-looking hammer. The guide reached down and grasped the hammer. As the legend said, she was suddenly filled with the strength to preserve. She briefly allowed herself to smile, then remembered why she had hurried so much to get here. With renewed vigor, she turned around and ran back towards the cave she had left Zethiro in. We obtained the hammer of the Thunder Bear. The guide screamed in frustration as she wandered through the blizzard. She had gotten lost somehow. Where was the cave? Where? Her eyes darted in all directions as she struggled to search. Most equines would have have long since frozen to death, but sheer force of will kept her going. Adding to her frustrations, the guidance was silent again. She had considered trying to force it to help her, though she had a stinking feeling that doing so would only make her situation worse. The guide resigned herself to simply keep looking. After some time, she spotted a rock formation jutting out of the snow through the corner of her eye. She sprinted towards it, praying that it belonged to the cave she'd left Zethiro in. When she got there, her heart surged with hopes as she recognized the cavern entrance. She froze when she saw an additional set of hoofprints leaving the cave. Panic began to set in. She looked inside, but Zethiro wasn't there. The guide sprinted back outside. She began to follow the other set of hoofprints. They appeared to be heavy tracks in the snow, suggesting that someone had dragged their hooves through it. She followed the tracks with a sinking feeling in her gut. Please be alive. Her heart skipped a beat when she stepped on something that was most certainly not the ground. She looked down to see an unmoving Zethiro who was partially obscured in the snow. The guide tore the snow away to get to him. Fear washed over her as she realized he wasn't breathing. She grabbed his hoof and shoved the hammer onto it, but nothing happened. "No, you can't die now," she sobbed. She kept pushing the hammer into his hoof and praying for a miracle that wouldn't come. Please, please, not like this. Tears streamed down her face, some freezing to her cheeks. This wasn't how it was meant to be. Wasn't how it was meant to happen. She remembered how scared he had sounded when he asked her not to leave. Did he know that he was about to die? Was he so afraid of dying alone that he tried to follow her? It didn't matter now. She had failed him. She let one of the few equines that she had actually grown to trust die, and she would carry this fact with her always. There was nothing you could have done? Well, there was something that she could have done, and that was maybe take him to the avians. But you know, she really hates birds. But that sad note aside, we convoy raided these guys enough that they lost supply, so they're gone. But continuing on this, Zethiro was as bustling as ever. The guide made her way through the crowd heading towards the port. It seemed like only just yesterday she and Zethiro were here, beginning their journey across Zalmar's domain. Try as she might, the guide could not get her late friend out of her mind. If things had gone differently, might he still be here with her now, or would fate have taken him away no matter what? These questions only continued to stir within her as she walked. She was so caught up in her thoughts that she didn't even realize that she had bumped into someone. Sorry? She stopped halfway through her apology. In front of her was a griffin. Said griffin turned to face her. The guide could see a Pegasus behind the griffin who seemed to be annoyed at the sudden interruption. The griffin faced the guide and bowed. "No need, the fault is mine. I was too busy saying goodbye to my beloved to notice I was obstructing traffic, and for that I apologize." A knife suddenly appeared in his throat. The guide instinctively slid it deeper to ensure the griffin's demise. She bared her teeth and spat. "Your kind will never be sorry enough for the pain you have caused to Equinity. Death is all you deserve." The griffin fell to the ground, leaving the Pegasus shocked. The guide retrieved her knife and glared at the Pegasus, raw anger emanating from her. "How does it feel, crypto-avian, to lose someone close to you?" The Pegasus tried to take flight and flee, but the guide's blade was faster. What? She doesn't learn anything. I don't feel bad for her anymore. And now we start our expedition here in Carthage. Great. Anyways, this war is all but over. We will win it soon after all those encirclements and continue the expedition on Zebrica next time.